Welcome to the Chester Centurions podcast, where we dive into the stories behind the region's most driven entrepreneurs, innovators and leaders. I'm Alan Bark, Business Growth Specialist and founder of Action Coach Chester, and today I'm joined by Tom Moore, COO of IAM Compliant, the one-stop platform helping schools stay safe and compliant and used by over 2,000 schools in the UK. Tom also leads IAM Learning, a library of 450 bite-sized animated courses that turn mandatory training into memorable story-driven learning. We dig into how to save the world from boring learning, why storytelling beats slide clicking, and how a 2019 startup grew to a 40-person team by focusing on outcomes, embracing smart mistakes, and sticking to what works. We'll talk AI, where it helps and where humans still matter, plus what's next, integration, sustainability, and net zero tools for schools, and taking a UK success global. Let's dive in. Tom, welcome to the Chester Centurion podcast.
Thanks, Alan. Good to be here.
So before we get started today, I'd love to know a little bit more about the business. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Tom Moore. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a business called IAM, or IAM Compliant Limited, if you kind of want to go official. We've kind of got two sides to our business, in short. So we've got a part called IAM Compliant that is best described as a one-stop shop for sort of school safety and compliance. So schools, time poor, head teacher might play 10 different roles, and we've come up with a piece of software that's got sort of 14 different features to it, but essentially allows them to look after the health, safety, policy and compliance of the buildings and all the assets they have on site. Sort of demystifies health and safety and gives them a tool that ultimately just makes their life easier. Used by 2,000 schools across the UK currently, and growing rapidly. And then on the other side of our business, we have an organisation called IAM Learning, which is kind of more my background and where I sort of came from, which is a training business where we use and create loads of different sort of training stuff from leadership, sales, health and safety, policy, compliance, cybersecurity, and on and on and on. But we do it in a very different way. So we use the sort of power of storytelling and the power of visual communication. So we create really high-end animated e-learning content in bite-sized format that's just kind of fun and engaging, and there's a lot of science behind it too. And so we've got a library of about sort of 450 courses, and we actually sell that learning content to both corporates, so high street brands that you see and love, big businesses around the world. And then we also take that same learning library and we offer it as part of the IAM Compliant product into schools, so they benefit from the behavioural training that comes with that sort of health and safety remit. So we've got these two sides of the business that sort of connect and have sort of slightly different focuses. And yeah, we've been at it since 2019.
If you go back about 5 or 10 years, there was a lot of talk about gamification of learning. Is that kind of similar to what you're doing, or is this completely different?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, gamification is one of those interesting words that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah. It's
kind of like, it's kind of like a spectrum, so to speak. But you're absolutely right in the sense that, yeah, the learning content we create is predicated on this idea of that I suppose we've all probably taken a learning course that's really been really boring. We've probably all sat in an organisation where they send you some compliance. It's often on something like GDPR or some other such sort of horrible topic that you kind of get presented with. And back in the day, sort of 5-10 years ago, we you probably sit through some kind of presentation style e-learning that would make you click through 100 slides. Every single slide had a kind of click next button in the bottom corner. It might have had a voiceover, which was probably really boring, and typically it might even have been some kind of like sort of boring person in a suit presenting it to you. If you were lucky.
I'm almost falling asleep now, Tom.
Exactly.
Thinking about it.
Exactly. And so we always said there's got to be a better way to do it. And in a previous life, I had a business where our strapline was saving the world from boring learning. And in fact, we used to actually put capes on and masks and run around trade shows, with our underpants on the wrong side of our trousers type scenario. But we're still on that journey of saving the world from boring learning. And yes, part of that is gamifying it, if you like, and using knowledge checks and scenarios and interactive elements and quizzes, and even the animation in a way is kind of pulling you in. If you think about your favorite story, your favorite film, your favorite book, it's because it tells a story and it's got characters, and it's the characters that suck you in and draw you in. And we use that same approach. We've been telling stories for thousands, tens of thousands of years, well, not quite, but thousands of years as humans. And yet, as grown-ups, you sort of get to this point where you think, well, I can't tell stories. I'm not allowed to like stories. Well, no, we still do. So why are we not doing that in our learning and how we continue to do that? So for that side of the business, that's absolutely a big part of what we do.
100% get it. I mean, I remember sitting through some pretty boring training sessions in my corporate career. And I remember one trainer, and he was talking about fight or flight and what happens to your body during fight or flight, but he wasn't in the room. And there was about 15 of us sitting in the room waiting for him. And he was like 2 or 3 minutes late. And we're like, this isn't like him. He's not late. And the door burst open and he came in dressed as a caveman with a big bat. And he goes, my name's Ugg. And there's testament right there. I mean, that was probably, it was probably 30 years ago. And I still remember that. I still remember that today. I remember the content as well.
Yeah, and we call that, and it is actually a sort of known thing, we call it the bizarreness effect. And it's this idea of that if something happens that, that makes you sit up and think, well, that's a bit different. So often in our learning content, we use characters, and all of our content's animated, as I said. So we have this ability to use quite interesting characters. So like in one course, there's a character that looks like a bit like an octopus with 8 arms. It's odd, but it does make you stop and think. So, like for all of our courses, we'll use themes where we might have, so we've got like a coaching course that uses a Serena Williams inspired tennis playing character. We've got a cybersecurity course that uses a James Bond inspired character, and so on and so on. But the point is exactly as you've articulated then, that if something's a little bit out of the ordinary, it makes you sit up, pay attention, and it's memorable, and it is that bit that hooks you back to that moment, and then the rest of it follows. You've just got to kind of find that balance between not over-egging the theme so that the theme overtakes the learning that's meant to be there as the behavioral change. But when you strike the balance, it's memorable, impactful, engaging, and it makes you want to learn more.
And if I remember right, there's 2 sides to your brain, left and right, of course. And the logical side is the left side and the creative side is the right side. But your long-term memory sits in the right-hand side of your brain. So if you have this creative learning environment, you're much more likely to establish something in your long-term memory. So cool. I love it, Tom. Love it.
Yep.
And tell me, what motivated you to get involved in the business, and what was the driving force behind the decision to take on this entrepreneurial role?
Yeah, so I guess I've always been interested in, I suppose, just sort of solving real problems, and you mentioned this sort of corporate career, and, I kind of went through that sort of cycle, 10 years in utilities and all that great stuff. But towards the latter end of that, I'm sort of heavily involved in some kind of large scale sort of behavioral change programs. So I did sort of 10 years nearly at United Utilities, and they had a really large change program that was worth about sort of £750 million. I did a couple of years at Talk Telecoms and similar there, working on their customer change program where they were winning a lot of customers, but also at risk of losing a lot of customers. And again, they went on quite a big drive, and they called it their consumer revolution, where they spent about £250 million going through a sort of change program. But what really got me interested in all of that was this sort of idea of change management, and sitting behind change management is processes and technology, but it's fundamentally people. And within that, there's this sort of idea of, I've always wanted to, kind of get stuck into something where I felt like I could leave, maybe not the world, but what I was working on slightly better than I found it. And that's kind of what really got me going. So I sort of found this passion for change and behavioral change and kind of working with people through that. And then sort of felt like actually, the opportunity to then do something where I could own that and control that was what led me to sort of start the business. And I mean, in lots of ways, when I kind of left my corporate career, I sort of fell into being an entrepreneur by chance, really. It kind of came out of that world, got in with a bunch of folks that I knew, one of whom had worked for me, and we formed a business. But it was just purely by sort of chance where I was made, sort of took me and they said, well, why don't you come work for us for a couple of weeks? And a couple of weeks turned into sort of 2.5 years, and we sold the business to an American company and just gave us that opportunity to sort of springboard. But I suppose it's just, I've always had this appetite, as I say, for solving a real problem, driving and enjoying change. But really, I suppose it's about keeping things simple, keeping things engaging. I like to just, do something, I suppose, that reflects my values. And that's kind of what brought me around to this idea of, well, actually, if I start my business, I can create a company that I would like to work for myself, do something where I feel like I can solve a problem that I've seen in the real world, this idea of boring content, and that kind of led us into this whole world around schools as well. So it was never around sort of being a CEO or being a director. It was more around making things better, and also that meant starting something new.
Create a company that I would want to work for.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot.
We have a few principles that sort of mirror that, really. We know, because I mean, not just that in the sense of creating a company I would like to work for, but it's the same when we talk about customers, for example. We sort of say, well, actually, we treat customers how we would like to be treated, and the same when we're creating a learning course, for example. We say, well, actually, if I'm the one, we only make content that we would want to take ourselves. So that sort of philosophy sits at the sort of heart and the DNA of what we do. So it's kind of like an overarching principle to everything we look to build out.
Love it. And what are some of the common misconceptions around running a business, and how do you go about addressing them, Tom?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I suppose the one thing I always thought when I started my own business was that would mean sort of total freedom, and that would sort of mean that almost anything goes, and in a way that is true. But I think the reality is that you end up sort of wearing every hat, sometimes sort of all at once. You're accountable, particularly in the early days, and we're sort of fortunate 6 years in, since we launched sort of IAM, that we've built a team now. We've got sort of roughly 40 employees in the company. That you do get to that point when you could start to let go of things, and that can be hard. But in the early days, you're doing everything. You're doing the marketing, you're doing the selling, you're responsible for the technology. You're spinning all those plates. And the biggest success with the biggest thing I enjoy actually now is that we've brought in people into our organization that can do the job better than I can. And whilst it's sometimes hard to let go as a founder, getting out of the way is what I sort of focus on now. I see my job more and more as actually what obstacles can I remove for the people that we brought in, and how do I get out of the way and work more on the business than in it. And I suppose, I think the other thing I say that is a misconception, I think, is that sometimes you sort of think that growth will solve all problems. You sort of think, oh, well, once I get a bit bigger, that'll be easier. But then in some ways, actually, I think growth just changes the problems. So you sort of end up in a position where all of a sudden you sort of think, well, okay, now we've got a lot bigger. So actually now we need to think about, well, how do I keep those customers? How do I focus on not just winning customers, but retaining those customers? How do I kind of grow the business sustainably? And then suddenly you realize that I'm creaking a bit over here, and I need this extra bit of technology. So it's kind of that constant evolving of the team, the tools, the leadership structure. And I suppose, how do you address them? Well, we've just tried to stay honest. We've tried to keep a day one mentality. We've tried to stay sort of lean. And I think the beauty of when you start your own business is you can be agile, and we still find ourselves getting things wrong, making mistakes. But actually we're in that position where when we've done something and we realize it's not quite right, we're still agile enough that we can go, right, tomorrow we'll do that differently. And so we still sort of talk about regularly the day one mentality, because it was in those very early days, it was literally 4 of us sat in an office in Chester, and things happened fast and frantically. And whilst we sort of describe ourselves as maybe a bit more of a kind of angry teenager these days, it's sort of, we try not to stray too far away from that idea of, well, actually, if we need to just do something differently, let's keep doing that. Let's stay true to that kind of early roots.
Really interesting. So in the beginning, you wear every single hat, and we describe that as a business owner being a generalist.
Yes.
And there are risks associated with that, because especially with a technician-led business, you kind of gravitate to what you're good at, and you forget about the other things. So that can be a risk. But as the business starts to grow, you build a team that are better than you. But I like this. As growth happens, the problems don't go away. They just change. So as a business owner, you described yourself as a problem solver, an engineer to build this beautiful Swiss movement of a machine that just, I can't remember what book it was out of, but they say that, boring is profitable, drama is not. And what we really look to do in a business is build a boring business where you pour beautiful opportunities in the top, and satisfied customers come out the bottom.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I spend much more time doing these days is hopefully just having that little bit of opportunity to step back and see, yeah, where is it still chaotic? Where is
Mm-hmm.
it still not quite kind of, flowing as you'd expect?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So, kind of you can maybe get a little bit of luxury to do that. But in the early days, yeah, you are just sort of spinning all those different plates. And don't get me wrong, sometimes you hark back to those days when it was simpler in some ways, when because it is, all under your control. But I like nothing makes me prouder now. I think they're looking at the structure that we created with the team, where we brought in really good people who are experts in their own fields, that are doing it better than we've ever envisaged effectively.
Makes it easier to let go, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah. There's still
Very good.
moments, I think, where I have to catch myself, where I tinker and kind of get stuck in and have to sort of realize that, okay, why am I sort of finessing this particular piece when I really don't need to? But it does definitely make it easier when you bring in that good person. And sometimes I think that's the thing that actually makes you realize when you sort of think, why am I not willing to let this bit go? It's perhaps because the person that's doing it isn't maybe the right person, or something isn't quite right with the process. And that's, I'm a big believer. Data's great in a business, and as we've got bigger, we rely more and more on data and science and using information to make decisions. But I'm a big believer in gut instinct as well, as a sort of founder and an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of a common thing, to be honest. And gut instinct and making decisions based on what we believe is right, more often than not, taking us in the right direction. And so I still rely on that heavily, I think, to sort of, when something doesn't quite feel right, you sort of think, okay. And even if the data or science is telling you opposite, I still sort of go with the gut more than I would perhaps data in reality.
Really interesting. And I agree without a doubt. You can do as much due diligence as you want, but you have to get to that point where you go, right, does this feel right or not?
Yes. Yeah.
Really cool.
100%.
So how do you maintain a work-life balance as a business owner? Do you have any sort of rituals or habits that keep you motivated and focused?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this question, when I sort of got there up front, my honest answer was, I mean, this is more me personally, is I really don't do a very good job at work-life balance. It is something I do constantly work at, but the reality is that I know I don't. I mean, my personality in particular is I do enjoy what I do, and I'm kind of very happy to get stuck into it, and I will often sort of be up early, doing some bits, and then maybe take a step back, and then I'll be at it again later, and I'll often sort of work late, and my ethic is that I will happily kind of just keep going at it, and that's not always kind of healthy. So I suppose and I've got young kids as well, so that can often sort of balance is important. So I guess I do try and create certain boundaries, and around that. And I guess the beauty and the nature of working for myself and owning my own business is that I can have that flexibility. So I will do the school run, and I will often go and do the school pickup and make time. And the beauty of it is, if the kids have got a school play at a certain time, I'll just go, well, that's fine. I'll carve out the time to be there, so I can be present in all those key moments, and activities that kind of keeps you grounded. And I don't mind sort of putting them to bed and do all that stuff, and then go, well, actually now the evening's a bit quieter, I'll do some stuff in the evenings, and you kind of have that luxury that perhaps you don't when you're doing a 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. I think having a good team around me, and around us is really important to that. The art of delegation and knowing when to sort of trust those around you to sort of run with things is really important when you can get to there. I'm a big believer in outcomes, not outputs. So I don't sort of micromanage. I'm not interested in knowing, and I say this the same to people, and because I'm the same, if you need to go and drop your kid off, or you've got disappointment or whatever, I don't mind where you are, when you are. It's about the outcome, and have we delivered what's important? Not that I'm literally looking at every single output and knowing that you've done 50 emails today, or made 20 phone calls, or done 10 meetings. That's not important. It's we said we'd get to X by this date or by this point. Are we achieving that? And I think the other big thing for me that I do is just I do try and make time for reflection. So whether that's I get to the gym, I quite like that for sort of 50 minutes on a day, getting out there and walking the dogs, or even just like reflection. And I try to do this. I think it is really important as a business owner. You can be running so hard all the time that you often forget just how far you've come. And so, for example, we were recently, the three company founders here were shortlisted for the Great British Entrepreneur Awards for sort of innovation.
Wonderful.
In the Northwest. So that's great. And that's a moment. And we just try and enjoy those moments when they come along, because you can often spend more time, maybe not criticizing, but focusing on that's the next bit I need to fix, rather than stopping and going, wow, we're 6 years in, we've done this, this, and this, we've hit this milestone, we've hit this revenue goal, this number of employees, this many customers, this award. And whenever that happens, we do just try and take those periodic moments throughout the year, whether it's a team away day or we do some welfare days occasionally, just use those as the opportunities to just kind of take stock, because I think that kind of really helps create balance in what we're doing.
I think there's some gold in there. So you mentioned enjoying what you do, and a previous guest had said something very similar to this. He says, if you do enjoy what you do, it's not work, it's life balance.
Yes.
But in the same breath, you're also aware that you have other humans as part of your family, and you're spending quality time with them as well, which I think is really cool. Quality time for reflection as well on where the business is, where you're taking it next. And people work in the business so intently that sometimes they don't allow themselves to think about strategy and working on the business and what they could do next. And I think the final point you said was being able to reflect and celebrate the success and the progression that you've made to this point and share that with the rest of the team. Beautiful. There's some real value in there for anyone listening. Thank you for that, Tom.
Great summary.
So listen, business is moving faster than it's ever moved. It's constantly evolving. How do you stay adaptable and open to change? And are there any specific strategies you use to remain innovative?
Yeah, so I guess the nature of what we do, being a tech business at heart, effectively, we're sort of education tech, learning technology. That landscape is definitely always evolving, like you say, and I guess innovation is almost kind of just part and parcel of our culture and ways of working. So I mean, certainly, we're embracing things like AI. We're trying to sort of remain outward looking. I guess I think one of the things that we do to sort of remain innovative and remain sort of looking forwards, we spend a lot of time talking to and listening to our customers. I think that's hugely important. In the early days, we had to kind of, in the absence of customers, you sort of have to come to market and do what you think is what customers want and test that and refine that. But we regularly listen, and as I say, we've got various mechanisms for doing that. We have like a community forum where customers talk, and we can listen in on that if you like and participate. We run customer events. Sometimes that might be things like sort of a breakfast club or a pizza and a pipe sort of scenario, and that sort of session. LinkedIn groups, customer surveys. There's various ways. Even just going around and doing customer account calls, and all of that intel comes back into us, and we do spend time looking at that and thinking about that. And I think going back to something I was saying before, I suppose, in terms of the problems don't go away, they change. One thing we do find now, though, sometimes is that because we've got an ever-growing customer base, we had a tendency maybe in the early days when one customer would say something and we jump at it and go, well, let's make that change. The challenge we have now is with thousands of customers is that we can't make all the changes. So you then have to start thinking about how you prioritize it and do what's the best ROI effectively, return on investment, and what's the thing that's going to maybe keep existing customers happy, is going to win you more customers, is something that the business can deliver, be that technically, commercially, et cetera, et cetera. So we definitely do a lot of that, and I think it's really important.
That's good.
So that's definitely sort of something we do a lot of. We do a lot of time as well, I think, sort of, learning from the sector. We see a lot of our competitors will always go in for sort of, looking to sort of have one over the competition. Our view of the world is, well, there's enough space for all of us, but it's about sort of seeing what they're doing and listening to what they're up to. And then listening to the team as well. We spend a lot of time thinking about the internal engagement. We have a sort of internal HR sort of platform that allows us to share ideas. And again, so it's a bit like a melting pot of those sort of, customer, competitors, and internal team that allows us to sort of think about all the changes that are going on. And I think it maybe goes back to what I was saying before about outcomes, not outputs. So we're not worried when the team fail and make mistakes. that's actively encouraged in the culture. And I think the other thing is whenever anyone joins our business, it's accountability from day one, and that can be a little bit terrifying for some people. When they come in and they go, well, what am I responsible for? And we go, well, this, and kind of get on with it. It's up to you. What's the strategy? What's the plan? We'll help you. We'll be there for you. But kind of go for it. So that they can learn and move on, and we'll embrace those. You expect people to make mistakes, but it's where do we want to get to? That's what's important. So I think that kind of culture and kind of moving parts helps us sort of constantly evolve and stay fresh in what we're doing.
So you said there that you actually encourage mistakes. Tell us a bit more about that, Tom. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so maybe an example might help, but so we're in the middle of a sort of a piece of integration work at the moment. It's not the most exciting, but essentially we are integrating with another platform system out there that is going to allow customers to pull in data from other systems they use. That's going to be great because it allows them to just have a single version of the truth, and so they can bring all that data together and just make better decisions. That's a process that we're going through, and what that's involving is us going out to our customer base and letting them know that that integration is available, and that by a simple click of a button, the two systems will link together, and that information will pull through. And we've given that as an activity, to one of the team, and just sort of said, "Hey, this is what we want to do. Crack on." Now that person's gone away and done that, but what they've sort of done is they've done a lot of the work, but the one bit that they sort of didn't do is that sort of proactive customer comms. So what we basically, long story short, what we found is that last week it was that we sent out all these batches of requests where all the customer needed to do was press a button. But because we hadn't done that upfront communication to let customers know that, hey, this change is coming, this is what it means, this is why it's important, this is why you want to do it, we literally had tens and hundreds of tickets come in and go in, I think we've had a cyber attack. I've suddenly had this data request. Why is this happening? What does this even mean? And it's just an example of where, someone's gone and done all that hard work, but just has missed that kind of front end piece. And rather than sort of saying, oh my God, the end of the world, just used it as a learning opportunity and sort of said, well, look, let's, we can, it's okay. We've made a mistake, and we kind of made light of it and gone back and sort of said, hey, put our hands up, bit of an error, here's all the work we have done, and then learn from that. And that person knows now for the next time we do that sort of activity, that front end proactive piece, they'll fill that in next time round. So that's just a sort of small example of just where we sort of say to people, go away, you lead on it. And if stuff happens, we don't fret, we don't sort of beat people up. We'll just go, right, how do we address this, move on, and know for next time.
That's a great example. It's a great example. Fail often, fail fast, but fail forward. As long as you're failing forward, then failure is a great thing, and mistakes are a great thing, as long as you're failing forward. Beautiful. I really like that. It's a really, really nice value to have in a business. What next? Could you offer a glimpse for your future plans and goals for the business? What's the next chapter?
Absolutely. Yeah, so for us, I suppose if we look back, and I think this is an interesting sort of we are a bit of a sort of turning point for our organization. And I always think look back at our journey, and those first sort of 12, 18 months was all about developing the idea, working it out, trying to sort of see what the market needed. We had that nugget of where we wanted to go with what we were up to, and you're sort of trying to build it out, win a few customers, prove the point. And in some ways, in the early days, selling a product with no product behind the scenes, sort of selling off the idea of a shopping list of, well, actually, would you buy into this school safety subscription, or, we're going to build, 350 courses in the next 5 years, but we don't have any right now other than this trailer. What do you think of this? And then that was the first almost year to 2 years we started trying to build it out. And then the middle block, we were very much in product mode. We kind of had those early adopters that believed in the vision we were creating, and what we were up to, and came on board. And then obviously that allowed us to sort of then go, right, we're proving this. Yeah, we've got people buying. So that kind of middle block of the business was all about, product development, effectively trying to get to the point where we felt we built out a product that had all the features we needed. And we're obviously going to keep evolving the product, but equally there kind of comes a point when you go, that's fit for market and is the best product that's out there right now at the best price point. So that was the kind of middle sort of 2 years. And then I suppose the last 18 months, it's really been about sort of impact and scale. So we've sort of flipped now and gone, right, we've proven the market. We know what our ideal customer profile is. We know who we're targeting. The product is there now. And yes, we've got a roadmap of how we're going to keep building that out. But it's all been around sales, marketing, and customer account management, because we're sort of saying now we've got a product, we need to take it to market and do that at scale. So I suppose for us, the areas of focus is kind of maybe two main things. Perhaps it's global. So on the education side of our business, we've been very focused on the UK market, still are. Our footprint is still relatively small, but it's quite a white space for us. So we're going after that aggressively and signing up a couple of hundred schools a month at the moment, and that's kind of really kind of going fast. But if you look out into the sort of global marketplace, there are a lot of similarities in sort of Middle East. There are a lot of British international schools that follow the same sort of standards as British schools. So we're very interested in exploring that sort of international market. And then the same on the learning side, though. We're already a kind of global business. We're used all over the world. We've got a reseller base of partners that resell our content literally all over the world. But the big thing in that world is translation and localization of content. And that's definitely something that was kind of been around for a while, but it's just becoming more and more prevalent. And again, AI is enabling that. Whereas now, tools are there that allow you to translate content almost effectively at a click of a button, and to do it very, very well and in a sophisticated way. So there's that. And then I think the other big thing for us is we're doing a lot around sustainability on all sides of the business, both internally in terms of how we sort of done, because it comes back to maybe our ethics and what we wanted to try and create is a lot of what we do is almost like social goods. But sustainability for corporates and certainly sustainability for schools is becoming a really big thing. And we've just finished the development on a product that is going to help schools tackle moving to net zero by 2050. So I suppose it's just that kind of constant evolution of our platforms, our content. And then I suppose the last thing is just sort of focusing on growing the business without us so much, in the sense that it's empowering others to lead, grow, and succeed. We brought in a leadership team for the first time. Previously, our structure was very much, hey, there's 30 people in the business, but they all sort of loosely report into the directors. It gets to a point where people want structure, they want development, they want growth, they want to know how the business is going to keep growing out. So there's way more focus on business planning and a horizon more of, you go back to the start and we were like, well, what does next week look like? Maybe what is even tomorrow? Now it's 3 to 5 year horizon, that we look out to, and having and empowering, as I was saying before, the leadership team to lead the business, so we can start thinking about the more strategic stuff and working on it rather than in it, is kind of where we're going, really.
Very good. And exciting as well, Tom, really exciting. Listen, I've got 2 more questions for you. We've got a pay it forward question, and we've also got the final question, which is a biggie. And it's what are the 3 biggest pieces of advice that you would give to maybe someone starting their own business, or maybe facing some challenges in their business at the moment? What are your top 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I just always say, surround yourself with good people, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I know it's kind of like a real obvious one, but I sort of feel, myself personally, I've always benefited from having a mentor or a coach or someone that I can go, and I've had that all the way throughout, both in my own sort of corporate career. I was always one, I had the CEO of United Utilities was a sort of mentor to me in the business. I've had an executive coach. And I just think that, having that, that ability to bounce things off, particularly even when it's someone that maybe is not even in your sector, just gives you that wider perspective. And we're fortunate in that some of the angel investors we've had in the business continue to do that. I just think it's hugely important to be able to just, and sometimes you sort of think, I can do this, but asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. So that's the number sort of 1 for me.
Love it.
Remember why you started, I think is a big one for me, because things do get tough. Times get tough. You have to make difficult decisions. So I think just sort of remembering that. And I think we've always, I kind of call it stick to the knitting, because I think there's a temptation, diversity and multiple product lines. It's kind of the curse of the entrepreneur. It's the idea of the next shiny thing that you could go and develop. But we've tried to stay really focused on what are we good at, and so when we talk about our sort of learning library and how we're building up the content and our animation style, we've stuck to that. Similarly, when it's come to the compliance product we have, there's been loads of times we've been tempted to go out into different sectors, healthcare, hospitality, and all sorts. And we've gone just, again, education is what we know, education is what we understand. So we've very much stuck to that. And it's been painful at times because you go, that opportunity there, we probably could do that and we could win it. And then you sort of think, am I leaving that? Am I leaving money on the table over there? And you just sort of think, no. And so we very rigorously stuck to that. We remembered why we started, what was our original intent, and we're still focused. And it's only now, 6 or 7 years in, where we felt like we've built up enough head of steam that we're starting to build out and think about the broader ambitions, but we're running that in a way that is not going to disrupt the day-to-day operations. Yeah. Because again, there's a temptation to pull people in and get everybody involved. And I think you run the risk of distracting what is running really well. And then for me, the last one, third one, is just sort of, I'm a big believer in just, we've always been really honest and we've always communicated with the team, even when we've had to make difficult decisions. We've had to let people go. We've had to change the shape of the business a couple of times. And that's meant that we've lost a few good people. Sometimes we've brought the wrong person in and they've not been performing and we've had to let them go. And those are always the ones that I sort of remember and, don't enjoy that side of it. But you have to sort of make those tough decisions. But when we've ever made that, the thing we've always done when we've done that is got everyone together in a room, or these days maybe a little bit more virtually because we've grown, and stood up and said, this is what's happened and why. And sometimes you can't go into all the fine details of perhaps why you've had to let someone go or whatever, and maybe the circumstances, but you can certainly stand up in that moment and let people know. And people have always sort of said we've really valued that honesty and integrity and transparency to what we're up to. So I'm a big believer in that as well, in terms of just, the times will be tough, but if you're honest and you talk to people, it always kind of gets you through the tougher times.
Brilliant. So just to summarize that, surround yourself with great people. You mentioned mentors, having a really good mentor. You mentioned coaches as well. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm not paid for that, by the way, folks.
no, that's unpaid. remember why you started. I love this. Stick to the knitting and avoid the shiny object syndrome, which is a massive, massive problem for entrepreneurs and business owners as a whole. Oh my God, squirrel, let's go over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny to watch, and I do it myself. So it is. You've got to be aware of it. You've got to avoid it. Stick to the knitting. I love that. And be honest and communicate really, really well. Be honest about your team. Be honest with your team. And it reminds me of a book by I think it was Kirsty. Gosh, I can't remember her second name, but the book's Radical Candor, and she worked with Bill Gates at Microsoft. I think she was on the board at Google. And she also worked with Steve Jobs at Apple as well. And so she had quite a career in Silicon Valley. And this Radical Candor book is exactly about that. You've got to be honest. You've got to be upfront. You've got, people deserve your honest communication. And I would certainly recommend that book if anybody's struggling with that at the moment. Kirsty Stott, I think. Can't quite remember her name, but Radical Candor, you'll find it online. So the last question is the pay it forward question. This is from Nick, who owns Oxbury Bank, which is one of the fastest growing banks in the UK, based here locally, focused on agricultural lending to farmers and the agricultural industry, but available for anyone to save in the bank. And it's a really cool, fast growing bank. Incredible. Now, he wants to ask, and you've mentioned AI a few times actually, but how safe is your business from the AI risk?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's two things that sort of strike me when thinking about that question. I mean, on one hand, from our business perspective, particularly more on the learning side of what we're doing and the content we create, there is a real tangible risk there, because some of the tools that are out there now, you can literally, from text, jump in and write out a kind of a script effectively, click a button and the cogs turn and out comes a piece of fully animated, kind of content in a variety of styles, from cartoon to fully realistic. But the interesting thing on that is that, and we kind of come full circle from, I've been in this sort of learning content industry for about 10 years now, where when I first started out, the emphasis was always on more content is better. Let's just make thousands of courses, and that's what it is. It's about the number of courses you have in your. But in reality, AI is great and it has a role to play. But the risk that we've got at the moment is anybody can create content. But what that doesn't necessarily mean is the content they produce is great. Just because you plug in some stuff into a machine learning and ask it to produce it doesn't mean that it's going to sort of deliver you the behavioral change that you want to realize. So on the learning side of business, we're actually in a lot of our marketing messaging now really leaning into the fact that what we do is AI enabled. So we're embracing it where it's appropriate to do so. So we use it for proofing, we use it for ideation. If we're translating a piece of content, we can plug it in and it can translate that piece of content really well, and then we can check it. But sitting behind that, we use humans to create the learning design. The learning objectives that the course is going to be delivered on is researched by a human person. The script is written by a human. The voiceover is a characterful and conversational, sort of delivery by a human. And this kind of, the thing I think about the AI sort of revolution that we're going through is that I think we'll come back a full circle a little bit to the kind of human centricity and the human sort of emotions that sit behind a lot of what this is. And my analogy is almost a little bit like, years ago, everybody kind of rushed to big out of city shopping centres, and everybody wanted to go to big shopping centres. But now there's a lot more emphasis these days on shop local and wanting to kind of go organic and kind of, I want to understand my food miles, and I want to kind of go support my local shops. And I think that there'll be an element of that with some of this AI approach, is that, so from a product perspective, we're really leaning into the human element of what we do. And so, for example, all of the learning content we create is still hand-drawn by a person before it is digitized and turned into animation. It's kind of the Disney Pixar approach. And there is a cell for every scene that you see on that screen, and somebody has gone through and hand-drawn that before it's digitized. It takes a lot longer to do, but the quality and passion that comes out of that is, I think, still way more evident than content that is produced by AI. But on the flip side, I think, there is always the risk of someone coming up behind the scenes, and kind of redoing what you're doing through AI. So, we recognize that risk. And I think, therefore, what we just continue to do is build out a roadmap, particularly on the software side of what we're doing, where we're just looking at and continue to stay focused on what's the sort of next challenge, what's the next opportunity, so that it just becomes maybe harder and harder for other new entries into the marketplace to displace us as the incumbent, because because of how we built things out and how it's a one-stop shop and how it's all connected. That's not going to be something that you can just create and recreate overnight. So we are aware of the challenge, we embrace it, we use it where it's appropriate, and then we emphasize the human element because we believe that makes us unique.
Beautiful. Quality, impact, and emotional intelligence, EQ. Thank you very much, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for helping us and giving us all that value. And hopefully we can catch up soon.
Yeah, brilliant. Lovely. Thanks very much, Alan. Really enjoyed it.
Very, very welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye now. Bye.
Bye.